Bibliophiles of the internet, today I'm here to do the Encanto book tag. This tag was created by Passport to Eden and it was recommended to me by my lovely friend Moonbook12, so thank you to them for sharing it with me. All of the questions and the original video will be included down below, so definitely check that out. It's kind of self-explanatory, but this book tag was inspired by the Disney movie Encanto, which is wonderful and you should watch it if you haven't yet. All the questions in this tag are sort of interpretations of the various songs throughout the movie, I believe in chronological order. So with all of that said, let's just get started. Number 1. Name a book that explores multiple family generations. This one's kind of a gimme because this book actually reminds me of Encanto, and I'm definitely not the first person to make this connection or comparison, but that would be The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. It's a multi-generational magical realism story about the Montoya family, whose presiding matriarch Orquídea has always possessed this very powerful, very mysterious magic. One day she sends all of her family members invitations to her own funeral, claiming that she's going to pass away very soon and that they have to return to their ancestral home if they want to claim their inheritance. But once everyone arrives, Orquídea does not die, but instead transforms, leaving each of her descendants with unique magical abilities, but also forcing them to grapple with the remnants of a dark and terrible curse. I think the comparisons draw themselves. In this case, there's a mysterious magical childhood home at the center of this story, there's an exploration of family history across multiple generations, and everyone in this family gets their own special powers that could either be a blessing or a curse. It has beautiful prose, it's an excellent example of magical realism that's both historical and modern all at once, it has a really ambitious trajectory, and I would absolutely recommend it. Number 2, what's a book you enjoyed that took longer than expected to finish? For once, I'm glad I keep track of my reading on spreadsheets because that was very helpful in looking up these stats, but I think I'm going to go with The Kingdom of Gods by N.K. Jemisin. This took me about 2 weeks to read, which is not an astronomical amount of time, but it's definitely longer than I usually take, and I remember slowly but surely working through this trilogy finale and wanting to take my time with it and give it some space. N.K. Jemisin's Inheritance trilogy is ambitious and expansive. My mind still kind of boggles when I think about how each book in this trilogy could technically stand on its own, but at the same time they become so much more complex when they're considered as a series. There's a lot in this trilogy that explores evolution, divinity, humanity, creation, and those are really big topics set against the backdrop of this richly imagined world. And I also think it's like 200 pages longer than any other installment in the trilogy, so I think that's also part of why I really gave myself time to work through it at a more gradual pace. Number 3, name a character who has to do it all. Interestingly enough, quite a few books I've read recently would fit the bill, but my heart is telling me to go with A Soft Place to Land by Janae Marks. It's a middle grade story about a young black girl named Joy whose parents are struggling a bit financially, and because her father recently lost his job, they've had to downsize and move into an apartment. It's a really big adjustment for Joy, who has to share a bedroom with her sister for the first time, get used to having really close neighbors, and even go to a new school, and now her family's butting heads a lot more because they have much less space. But she befriends another girl in her apartment building who shows her this secret hideout in the basement where the kids in the building escape to when they want to hang out, play games, have some quiet time, or even just be by themselves. There's a sort of mystery that unfolds on top of that as well, and it's just super fun and heartfelt. Janae Marks has quickly become one of my auto-read authors. Her debut, From the Desk of Zoe Washington, was one of my favorite books of 2021, and I can already say that A Soft Place to Land will definitely make my 2022 list. As for the prompt, I think this book perfectly fits because Joy is having to deal with a lot of really difficult things and big changes, and she has to be a good sport about it for everyone else's sake. She feels like she has to be strong for her younger sister, she feels like she has to put on a positive attitude for her parents who are already very stressed, she has to make a lot of sacrifices, and then on top of that, her friends are trusting her with this really big secret about their safe space. It's a story that really thoughtfully addresses those kinds of pressures and internalized expectations really well, and I cannot recommend it enough. I do also want to say that an honorable mention would be Front Desk by Kelly Yang. If you've been around here for a while, you know I talk about this trilogy constantly. It's about a first-generation Chinese-American immigrant, Mia, who helps her parents run the motel where they live and work. I mean, if you want to talk about a character who's really doing everything, that would be Mia. She runs the front desk, she helps clean the room, she helps her parents with marketing and advertising, and she's super involved with both her community and the business. She's a go-getter balancing a million and one things at once, and that's not even to mention her own schoolwork or friends or problems or dealing with the pressures of being a Chinese immigrant in America. She's dealing with a lot of things, and I love the journey she takes in this series. Number 4, talk about a book you haven't talked about before. This was kind of tricky for me because talking about every book I read is kind of what I do, so I was stuck trying to figure out if I should instead talk about a book I haven't mentioned in a while or a book I haven't read yet. I don't really love either of those options for this prompt, so I'm going to kind of cheat here and talk about a book I've read recently but I haven't technically wrapped up yet, and that is The Bronzed Beasts by Roshni Chokshi. This is the third and final book in the Gilded Wolves trilogy, and just thinking about it and even saying it out loud makes me feel a lot of things. This is one of the best series finales I've ever read, and I'm upset about it. I'm upset because Roshni Chokshi did not have to go that hard, but also because finishing this trilogy only confirms that this series deserves so much more love than it actually gets. It's romantic, it's tragic, it's beautiful, it's exciting, it's epic. It's another series that's sort of grappling with the line between divinity and humanity in really complex ways, and just saying all of that is really all I have to give at this point. Number 5, name a book that you thought would be light and fluffy but hit emotionally. I mean, I could say The Gilded Wolves again, but I won't. I think I'll go with another recent favorite and upcoming release, Right Where I Left You by Julian Winters. To be clear, I go into all of Julian's books fully knowing that he's going to make me feel things, but the emotion and thoughtfulness of this particular story still took me by surprise. This is a queer contemporary coming-of-age story about an Afro-Latina boy named Isaac trying to enjoy his last summer before college with his best friend Diego, and he has a ton of plans to make sure that it's unforgettably epic. One of the major highlights will be finally going to Legends Con together to meet all of their nerdy heroes and have a great time. However, when tickets finally go on sale, Isaac runs into a former crush and he misses the window to secure those coveted badges. Now he has to spend the summer trying to make up for that mistake with Diego somehow, while also grappling with how their friendship is inevitably going to change when school starts and they part ways. I think when you hear the synopsis for this book, you think about queer summer romance, summer adventures, there's a huge convention in the background, and it certainly has all of those things, but there's also so much more under the surface. There's a really complex friendship between Isaac and Diego as they try to balance growing into their own person while also maintaining their relationship, which can be really tricky, especially when romantic feelings come into play. But there's also a deeply emotional family dynamic at the center of this story as well, because Isaac's relationship with his mom and his siblings has changed a lot ever since his parents' divorce. He's carrying around a lot of anger and sadness and pain and insecurity that stems from that emotional trauma, and it not only impacts how he sees himself, but also how he develops relationships with the people around him. I truly think this is some of Julian's best work yet, and while it delivers on the fun and fluffiness you would expect from a summer romance, it's also emotional and vulnerable and incredibly authentic. And I think an honorable mention for this prompt would be the Fairyland series by Catherine M. Valenti. I still need to finish this series, but I think about it all the time. It's a whimsical middle-grade fantasy story about this girl named September whose life has changed ever since her father went to war and her mother went to work. One day, a mysterious, magical wind approaches her from her open window, and she's whisked away to help save Fairyland, which is being controlled by a dangerously unpredictable Marquess. The writing, the whimsy, and the imagination is incredible in this series. I think you go into it expecting this grand, exciting adventure, which you absolutely get, but there's also an underlying sense of pain and sadness. Fairy tales, when you think about it, often begin from a place of grief, and this is a fantasy world that profoundly understands that and doesn't shy away from that dissonance. There's wonder, there's magic, there's delightful nonsense, but because of what September is going through emotionally, there's also an urgency and a necessity to her trying to save this magical place. Number 6, characters who make you believe in soulmates. I want to say Cemetery Boys and The Gilded Wolves so badly, but again, I won't. I wanted to go in a different direction with this because I know people often assume that soulmates automatically equates to romantic relationships when it doesn't actually have to, and I think soulmates come in all shapes and forms, so I'm going with Dariush the Great Is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. This is a queer contemporary coming-of-age story about a Persian-American boy named Dariush who speaks better Klingon than Farsi, but he and his family are taking their first ever trip to Iran to visit with his ailing grandfather while they still can. The trip is basically a huge reset for Dariush, who's never really fit in back home trying to navigate his culture and also his clinical depression, but in Iran he meets a boy named Sorab who's allowing him to feel okay in his own skin for maybe the first time in his life. The soulmates in this case would obviously be Dariush and Sorab, who become best friends even after Dariush goes back to the States. To address the prompt, they make me believe in soulmates because there is that intimacy, that familiarity, that vulnerability between them almost instantly, even though they live on opposite sides of the world and possibly would have never met. Sorab teaches Dariush a Farsi phrase that translates to, "Your place was empty," as in the space you occupy now in my life was empty before you came to fill it. And I think that affirmation really encompasses their dynamic. They are platonic soulmates, and you cannot convince me otherwise. Number 7, talk about a book that features rebuilding relationships. Again, I'm gonna kinda go against the grain here and say The 30 Names of Night by Zain Jokodar. This is another multi-generational story about a nameless Syrian-American trans boy who's grieving the loss of his mother, who was a renowned ornithologist, and he's trying to complete her unfinished research. He finds a journal of a famous Syrian artist who spent her life painting and documenting the birds of North America, and he realizes that his mother might be connected to this artist's work. This book is an epic and emotional ballad. It is a near-poetic love letter to self-discovery and how it can be connected to family history, and I think the relationship being rebuilt is the relationship between this protagonist and his community, his family, and perhaps most importantly, himself. By reading this journal and diving into his family's story, I think he's also rebuilding the relationship he has with his own culture. There's an entire history there that he's never been able to learn about, and he's finally getting that chance. This is an incredibly powerful blend of historical and contemporary fiction. It struck me so deep in my soul, and I cannot say enough how much I recommend it. And finally, number 8, name a book that left you feeling immersed in the culture. This one's tough because I've read a lot of amazing stories either inspired by or explicitly rooted in specific cultures, and there are so many that are so incredibly well done, but I feel like I really have to give it to Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass. This is part memoir, part manifesto from Dr. Kimmerer, who is both a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation and also a celebrated botanist. In this book, she's exploring how her cultural beliefs and history have taught her how to understand and approach nature, and how it's very much distinct from Western thought and practices. It leaves you feeling fully immersed in the culture because she shares traditional stories, myths, and teachings, but also because she makes connections between beliefs, languages, and nature that don't often, if at all, get considered in Western science. So it's about addressing those gaps in connection, empathy, and mindfulness in a way that's much more grounded and holistic. I really appreciate this book because it walks a very fine line of sharing culture with the intent of inspiring appreciation as opposed to appropriation, and because it really makes the reader rethink their own relationship with the earth and natural resources, which is a really tremendous feat. This has nothing to do with the prompt, but if you want to read more stories about Indigenous science, I think you should definitely check out Firekeeper's Daughter, which would have also perfectly fit this prompt, and also the memoir Fresh Banana Leaves. So those are all the questions for the Encanto book tag. I will tag a few people down below and on social media, but if you would like to do this tag yourself, then please consider yourself tagged. If you've read any of the books I mentioned today, or if you can think of any others that would address these prompts, I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. But that's everything I had to share for this book tag today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.